This is the Voices of Titanic podcast, episode 11, and I'm your host, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's story is quite an interesting one in that the man I'm going to tell you about today not only perished on the night of April 15th, 1912, but he also helped build the Titanic. In addition to this, the tale of his sons and their last exchange before Titanic set sail is heart-wrenching, to say the least. This is the story of Thomas Millar. Thomas Millar was born August 11, 1879 in Carrickfergus, Ireland, to parents Thomas Millar Sr. and Agnes McGowan. Carrickfergus, also known as Carrick, is a large town in Northern Ireland. It's located 11 miles northeast of the capital of Belfast. It currently has a population of approximately 27,000 people. Carrickfergus actually predates Belfast and was in existence for centuries before the capital city came into being. It was also said to be larger and more economically important than Belfast. On April 2nd, 1912, thousands of townspeople of Carrickfergus arrived to watch the Titanic make her first ever journey up the loch from its construction dock in Belfast. I found a painting of this scene from an artist named Deborah Wenlock, and I'll post it on the show's Instagram. It's very pretty. Thomas Millar's father was a ship's officer, also known as a mate, while his mother's occupation was unknown. Little is documented about young Thomas's life, but we know that in the fall of 1900, he married Jeanie Ruddock, also known as Jane, from Belfast. Thomas and Jeanie had their first son, Thomas Jr., born on February 9, 1901. In 1901, Jeanie and baby Thomas were living with her parents and siblings in a house on Meadow Street in Ireland. Thomas Sr. was not listed on the census, so I'm wondering if he was away at work at the time. Their second son, William Ruddock, was born March 5th, 1907. Young William ended up going by the name Ruddock to decrease any confusion since there were so many Williams in the family. In the 1911 census, the family was living at 14 Hillman Street. Thomas worked as a shipfitter. A shipfitter helps prepare and assemble large steel components of a vessel. This can include the hull, the superstructure, the decking, etc. Before Thomas worked at Harland & Wolff, he started with an apprenticeship at the same company and moved on to work at Vickers of Barrow Workman Clark & Company. And then after his work there, he returned to Belfast and began his work at Harland & Wolff once again. In addition to the two children, they also had a 21-year-old nephew living with them, Thomas Chisholm. I am unsure of which side of the family he comes from. It was said that Thomas took a lot of pride in his work on ships and that he was given the opportunity to help build the engines of the Titanic. He would tell his boys all about his work on the newest and grandest ship. Tragically, Jeanie passed away on January 18, 1912, at the young age of 32 due to tuberculosis. Thomas was now a widower with two young boys. He was forced to now come up with a plan to give his children a better life. With this in mind, he left the docks and signed up to work for the White Star Line. The idea was that he would scope out America during his travels, and when the time was right, he and the boys could settle in the States and start over as a family. Thomas was hired as an assistant deck engineer, where he was responsible for the maintenance of cranes and davits, among other things. He was also signed on for the Titanic's maiden voyage. In the Titanic crew logs, he gives his address as 19 Meadow Street in Belfast. His previous ship was listed as the Gothland, originally built by Harland & Wolff for the Red Star Line in 1893. His monthly wages were £9 and 10 shillings, and like all crew, his boarding time was 6 a.m. on April 10, 1912, in Southampton. When the day for departure finally came, he left his boys in the care of his sister, their Aunt Mary. Saying goodbye to Thomas and William, he told them, quote, "Be good to your aunt and try not to fight with your cousins." He then pulled 4 new 1912 pennies from his pocket and gave 2 to each of his children. He said, quote, "Don't spend these until we're together again." Close to the darkness of night, the brothers watched the Titanic steam away from the shores of Belfast Loch. They would never see their father again. Thomas Millar died in the sinking, and if his body was recovered, it was sadly never identified. His final moments are unknown, and he was only 32 years old. Thomas Millar is commemorated on the Engineers Memorial in Andrews East Park in Southampton. He is also remembered on the Titanic Memorial plinth in the Titanic Memorial Gardens of Belfast. His family headstone, along with his wife Jeannie, is located at Section D, Plot 189 in Carrickfergus at the Victoria Cemetery. I had a lot of difficulty tracking down what became of Thomas and Jeannie's sons, and it's with huge thanks to Susie Millar's book, The Two Pennies, that I was able to get all of this information I'm going to share with you. Thank you to her and her contribution, not only to her own family's legacy, but to the Titanic community as well. It is fantastic information, so what I'll be telling you next comes from her book. Now orphans, having lost both of their parents within the same year, only a few months apart, Thomas's sister Mary continued to raise the boys. They lived in a cottage in Bonnybefore until about 1919. When Ruddock was 12, he, Aunt Mary, and some of his cousins moved into a 3-story house on Atlantic Avenue in Belfast. Ruddock Millar became a renowned author, playwright, and journalist amongst the literary circles of Belfast. In 1934, he took a ship from Ireland to England to further his career. His ventures in London were not as successful as his popularity back home, so he did return to Belfast less than a year later. I found an article from 1935 from the Sunday Independent, dated June 16th, discussing Ruddock's literary feats. I'll read it to you now. Journalist's play. A new play centered around the Depression and the Belfast linen industry and its reaction on an old established linen firm and family was produced for the first time during the week at the Little Theatre, Belfast. The theme was somewhat unusual. The author, Mr. Ruddock Millar, who was well known in Belfast journalistic circles, was received with enthusiasm when he responded to his curtain call on the first night. The Tide Turns is the author's first long play. As the author of Stir About from an Ulster Pot, Mr. Millar is already known to a large public. He is also popular as a broadcaster from the Belfast studio. Mr. Millar is a sub-editor on a Belfast newspaper. The name Millar is inscribed on the Titanic Memorial in Belfast. Ruddock, at an early age, suffered the loss of his father in the Titanic disaster. Ruddock married Etta Wolsey, and they had 2 children, Rupert, born in 1935, and Gillian in 1944. In 1950, he received a payment of £200 from the National Disasters Relief Fund, which was the, quote, full and final settlement of his claim. William Ruddock Millar passed away November 26, 1952, at the age of 46 from a heart attack. He had 5 granddaughters, 4 of them living in England, and 1, Susie Millar, remaining in Belfast. On February 8, 2012, a blue plaque was presented at the Millar family cottage in Bonnybefore. I'll post a picture of it on the Instagram. It is in honor of Ruddock's life and his work. It's really sweet. Young Thomas Millar, or Tommy, married and raised a family in Belfast. He had at least 1 child, another son named Thomas. It was said that Tommy and Ruddock kept in contact but were not close. There's no reason given other than the possibility of their age difference. Heartbreakingly, Tommy did not keep the 2 pennies his father gave him, and I'm unsure of their fate. He and his son did attend Ruddock's funeral, but the families lost touch after the ceremony. There is no more information I could find about Thomas Jr. after this point in time. In the summer of 2010, Susie writes that of Aunt Mary's 8 children, 3 had children of their own, and all of these descendants, including Ruddock's descendants, met up at the cottage in Bonnybefore for a reunion. Now, I want to circle back to Thomas Millar's great-granddaughter, Susie Millar. Susie has lived in Belfast all her life. She runs a tour company specializing in the Titanic sites of the city called Titanic Tours Belfast. It's the only tour in Belfast led by a direct descendant of a Titanic crew member. I have to check it out when I go. Fingers crossed it's next year. Susie was a television news reporter for over 20 years and has traveled around the United States sharing the story of the Millar family. In 2011, she published the book I got a great deal of my information from, titled The Two Pennies. It's a book detailing the Millars' family story from different family members' perspectives. In a 2011 BBC News article, she is quoted as saying, "Belfast kept quiet about its Titanic connection for too long. We can now start to share that story with the rest of the world. For so long, we didn't know how to deal with Titanic. We were a bit embarrassed about it, but now we have come to a place where we can celebrate it as an achievement. It was a beautiful ship and a beautiful piece of engineering." Little William, or Reddick, never gave up his pennies, and they are now in Susie's possession. In 2011, one of these pennies could be seen at the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. I'm not certain if the penny is still on display or if this was a short-lived exhibit, but if anyone knows, please feel free to comment on the Instagram page. The Pigeon Forge attraction is on my bucket list as well. On April 6, 1912, Susie boarded the MS Balmoral in Belfast for the 100th anniversary Titanic cruise. This cruise retraced the route of the Titanic 100 years later. If you remember, Catherine Jane Wallace's descendants boarded this cruise as well. Susie had the rare opportunity to view the village of Bonnie before, where her grandfather and great-uncle lived. I'd like to read an excerpt from her book, The Two Pennies. I think the voice of Thomas's great-granddaughter is just as important to their legacy. To think that the vast hull of Titanic lay underneath the water was an awesome feeling. Here, in the middle of nowhere, where no other lights shone, was the place where Titanic had met her fate, and where my great-grandfather had spent his last hours, no doubt thinking of the two sons who were to be left orphaned by his attempts to get them a better start in life in America. The commemoration took the form of two services, one indoors and the other on deck at the stern of the ship. There were about 22 families of Titanic passengers and crew represented on the cruise, and we were given a privileged position at the front of the crowds. The ship's whistle was sounded at the moment when Titanic would have hit the iceberg, and again to mark 2:20 a.m. when she sank beneath the surface of the water. What will stay with me forever is how quickly that time passed. When played out in real time, you realize just how little time there was for people to be put into lifeboats. If anything, it was an incredible feat to get 700 people off the ship. The moment when the wreaths were thrown into the ocean was the point at which I finally felt the emotion of loss for my great-grandfather. I could imagine what it must have been like for him so far from home in the last moments of his life. Many of my fellow passengers chose to stay up for the entire night and to watch the dawn break in the same way as lifeboat passengers would have waited for rescue to appear. There was a shared sense that we had taken part in something incredibly special, and we had been privileged to be part of an event which had paid a fitting tribute to the 1,500 souls lost on that April night exactly 100 years ago. What a beautiful way to honor Thomas Millar and her grandfather's grief and experience. As of a 2014 article by Nebraska Wesleyan University, Susie was working as a freelance journalist for BBC Northern Ireland. She is also a committee member of Belfast Titanic Society and works with the SS Nomadic Trust. Thank you, Susie, for your dedication to your family's history and story, as well as your contributions to the Titanic community. We keep coming across two themes running through the voices of Titanic passengers and crew, and those themes are sacrifice and family. We hear stories of families striving for a better future for their children and all those generations yet to come, those that are yearning for a new chapter for themselves, and those that had to leave families behind to work in the service of others. Time and again, we learn how many men, women, and children on the Titanic were dreaming of something more. It's incredibly frustrating and extraordinarily painful that hundreds of these people were never able to attain these dreams. Lives cut too short, lineages that never bloomed, goals never accomplished. Thomas Millar wanted to do right by his boys after they lost their mother. He wanted to provide for them with a fresh start, something positive and exciting for two children to look forward to. I can't even begin to fathom the pain they must have felt after losing their mother and to have their dad die so shortly afterward. Thomas really deserved to fulfill those dreams for his family, and it's horrible that he never got that chance. How cruel fate can be when a parent is making such a huge sacrifice for what they believe to be the better choice for all. I really feel like those two pennies are a symbol of hope and of dreams and of a better future, and I'm glad that one of his sons held on to them for his entire life. The silver lining I have to look for is the legacy these people leave behind. Thomas Millar has a great-granddaughter sharing the story of Titanic and the tales of her passengers and crew, a descendant to keep the family name and their story alive, a woman that makes Belfast proud. Those are the positive angles I have to look for when tragedy strikes, that even when life is taken, a beautiful imprint is left behind. Let's pause and have a moment of silence for Thomas Millar and the trauma and loss felt by his two young sons. Let's also take a moment to pay our respects for his contributions to the building of the grandest ship in the world. Rest in peace, Thomas. Thank you, crew, for joining me in today's episode. As we disembark, I wish you happiness, love, and peace. Take care, and I'll see you next time on the Voices of Titanic.